History remembers the gold. It remembers the silk, the vast empires, and the monuments built to reach the heavens. But history forgets the smell of the timber on the slave ships. It forgets the sound of iron chains scraping against a stone floor. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire was the center of the known world. At its heart sat a palace. And inside that palace sat a system designed to strip a human being of everything. Their land, their faith, their family, their very name. The system was absolute. It did not bend. It did not break. Until a teenage girl from a forgotten village walked through the gates. She arrived with nothing. She was property. She was an object to be bought, sold, used, and discarded. Yet, within a few short years, she would break a century-old law. She would bend the most powerful ruler on earth to her will. She would turn a palace of luxury into a battleground where the price of losing was death. This is not a fairy tale of a palace. This is a blueprint of survival. The world was small, and it was quiet. At birth, she was likely named Anastasia, or perhaps Alexandra Lysovska. She was merely the daughter of an Orthodox priest. Her home was Ruthenia, a green, quiet region that is now part of western Ukraine, held then by the Kingdom of Poland. Her life had already been decided for her. She was to look at the same fields every day. She was to marry a local boy. She was to serve the church. Her father served the altar, and she was meant to serve a quiet household. But peace is an illusion in a borderland. It happened early in the morning. The air was still cold when the horses arrived. Crimean Tatar forces moved through the region like wildfire. They did not come to conquer. They came to harvest. They took the horses. They burned the wood. And then, they took the people. Young men, young women, children. She was taken. In a single hour, her father's church was gone. Her mother's voice was gone. Her name was stripped away. She was no longer a person. She was cargo. The journey was long and cruel. She was brought first to the slave markets of Kaffa on the Crimean Peninsula. Imagine the noise, the shouting of merchants, the weeping of broken families, the smell of sweat and fear. The traders looked at the young girl. They examined her teeth. They looked at her hands. They made a decision. The price in Constantinople would be much higher. So, she was loaded onto a ship. The Black Sea was vast, cold, and indifferent to her tears. The waves tossed the wooden hull for days. Women wept in the dark below the deck. Did she weep? Or did something inside her turn to stone? She arrived in Constantinople without a name. She was an individual who had ceased to exist in the eyes of the law. She was a commodity, a thing. She was placed first as a servant in the household of the Sultan's granddaughter. She cleaned floors. She carried water. She watched how the powerful spoke. She learned the language of her captors. She did not complain. She did not fight. She survived, and she waited. Then, she was noticed. She was purchased again. This time by Hafsa Sultan, the mother of the Sultan himself. This was not a small matter. The mother of the ruler bought her as a gift for her son. The name they gave her was Hürrem. In Persian it means the cheerful one. What a cruel joke. A girl who had lost everything, forced to smile to survive. She was somewhere around 15 to 17 years old. She was a child in a den of wolves. The man she was being sent to had just become the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. His name was Suleiman. He was young, he was ambitious, and he held the power of life and death over millions. And this was where her life changed again. The Topkapı Palace held more than 4,000 people inside its stone walls. It was a city within a city. At the very center of that palace sat a world that almost no outsider ever saw. The harem. The word itself means forbidden. A single, heavily guarded corridor led inside. The outer walls had no windows. No man entered except the Sultan, and the eunuchs who guarded the doors with heavy swords. Inside, it looked like heaven. The walls were tiled in blue, green, and gold. Fine carpets covered the floors from wall to wall. Fountains ran in the open courtyards. Musicians played through the day. The women wore silk and heavy jewelry. They ate from the finest kitchens in the entire empire. They had access to books, to teachers, to everything a woman of that era could have ever wanted. Everything, except the right to leave. This was the place they called the Palace of Bliss, because apart from their freedom, the women wanted for nothing. They were educated. They were trained to be refined, intelligent, and capable. Why? Because the women inside this palace were not there by accident. They were there for a reason. The Ottoman Sultan did not marry. Not a princess, not a noble woman, not a woman from his own people. A royal marriage would have tied him down. It would have bound him politically and by blood to another family, another power, another set of loyalties. The Sultan was considered above that. He was separate from ordinary society. So, his heirs came from the harem. Women taken from Christian territories across Eastern Europe, from Ruthenia, from Russia, from the Greek coast, were brought here. They were converted to Islam, and kept inside these walls. Their children had no ties to any foreign power. No rival kingdom could claim them. That was the point. But it came with a terrifying cost. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe and share to support the channel. Every woman inside those tiled walls knew the truth. The harem was a golden cage, but it was also a battlefield. When a sultan died, the peace died with him. Every single son had an equal claim to the throne. There was no fixed heir, no firstborn rule, no law that favored the oldest boy. Instead, there was a race. A desperate, bloody race for power. The son who secured the capital first. The one who seized the treasury and won the loyalty of the army, he became the sultan. And what happened to the others? What happened to his brothers? They were killed. A bowstring around the neck. No blood spilled. That was the law. Every woman in the harem knew this. Every mother with a son was already at war. They were not just fighting for favor. They were fighting for the lives of their children. The woman who managed all of this chaos was not the sultan. It was his mother, the Valide Sultan. Her name was Hafsa Sultan, and she was the real power inside the harem. She chose which women the sultan would see. She chose for beauty, yes, but more than that, for intelligence, for composure, for the kind of mind that could one day advise a future ruler. The women she selected were brought to a pool beneath the sultan's private chambers. He could observe them from above without ever being seen. He would watch, he would judge, and then he would choose. Then, the chosen woman would be prepared. The older women of the harem would bathe her in scented oils. Her hands and her belly were painted in intricate designs of henna. She was dressed in the finest silk and heavy jewels. Musicians led her through the dark, winding corridors to the heavy door of the sultan's chamber. A eunuch announced her arrival. She entered, bowed low before him, and approached from the foot of the bed. The expectation was simple. A few nights, then the sultan would move on. Either he grew tired of her, or she became pregnant. And then she was set aside to raise his child in a distant corner of the palace. That was how it had always worked. One mother, one son. That was the unwritten rule to keep the peace. Then, Hürrem stood at the edge of that pool. Suleiman looked down from his balcony. What did he see? He saw the bright red hair, the unusual face, something sharp and fierce in her expression that the other women did not have. They were passive, she was alive. He chose her. Then, he called for her again. Then, again. The standard rotation of women did not resume. The sultan was breaking his own routine. Now, there was already a woman in the harem who had held this position. The position of the sultan's chosen one, and she had held it for years. Her name was Mahidevran. She was elegant, she was noble, and she had already given Suleiman his first son, a boy named Mustafa, born in the year 1515. In the brutal world of the harem, that made Mahidevran more than just a favorite. It made her incredibly powerful. The mother of the eldest son was the mother of the heir. The army watched young Mustafa grow. The court watched him. Mahidevran's future was as secure as a future could possibly be inside those walls. Until Suleiman stopped coming to her bed. When Mahidevran understood what was happening, that this new girl, this red-haired slave from Ruthenia was replacing her, she did not stay quiet. The jealousy turned to absolute madness. She found Hürrem in a corridor. She struck her. She flew at her with her nails, scratching Hürrem's face until the blood ran. She screamed insults at her. She called her soiled meat. It was an insult designed with a dark purpose, to make Hürrem untouchable to the Sultan, to make her seem used, ruined, and completely worthless. The next time Suleiman sent for Hürrem, she did something unthinkable. She refused him. She sent word to the ruler of the empire that she was not worthy of his attention. She sent word that she was, as Mahidevran had said, nothing but soiled meat. Suleiman was furious. He was the Sultan. He was not used to being refused. He sent for her again, an absolute command. She came. The deep scratches were still fresh on her face, the blood dried, her hair tangled. She did not cry. She did not beg. She told him simply, coldly, exactly what had happened, who had said it, what had been done to her body. She had given him her side of the story first. From that very day, Mahidevran was finished. Suleiman had her instantly removed from the palace, sent away with her son Mustafa to a provincial city far from Constantinople. She would not return to court while Hürrem lived. A position that had taken Mahidevran years to build was gone in a single, calculated conversation. Hürrem had won the first battle, but the war had just begun. The harem had one unwritten rule above all others: one mother, one son. It was a strict rule of survival. A woman bore a single male child to the Sultan. She raised him. She watched him. She dedicated every waking second of her life to placing that one boy on the throne. Once that son was born, her time in the Sultan's bed was over. She did not return to his chambers. She did not have another child. Why? Because a mother with multiple sons would face an impossible nightmare. If she had two sons, she would have to choose which one would live, and which one would die by the bowstring. Her world narrowed to one boy, one single chance. Hürrem looked at that rule, and she shattered it. She did not step aside. She did not let the Sultan move on to other women. Instead, she gave Suleiman 6 children. First came a son, Mem. The palace held its breath. Would she be sent away now? No. She stayed. Then came a daughter, Marima. Then another son, Abdullah, who tragically died as an infant. Then came Salim, then Bayezid, and last, Jahangir, a boy born fragile, his body twisted, his spine never fully straight. 5 sons, 1 daughter. With each birth, the old structure of the empire groaned and weakened. The court could not comprehend it. How was this foreign slave holding the master of the world in her hands? They could not explain it with logic. So, they called it sorcery. Whispers spread through the stone corridors like poison. They whispered that she had bewitched the Sultan. They said she used dark magic, potions, roots from her homeland to blind his eyes. To test this theory, the Sultan's own family tried to intervene. 2 beautiful, red-haired women were brought into the harem. Women who looked exactly like Hürrem. It was a trap to see if his desire was just for a type of beauty. Suleiman did not even look at them. He sent them away immediately. Other concubines who had lived in the palace for years were suddenly given as wives to government officials, removed from the palace completely. The entire system ground to a halt. Suleiman chose one woman, and he never returned to the others. But love in a palace does not mean peace. Suleiman spent much of his reign on military campaign. Belgrade, Buda, Vienna, Persia. He was away for months, sometimes years, riding across muddy battlefields thousands of miles away. When he was gone, they wrote. Their letters still exist today. They are not formal. They are not distant. They are burning with passion and fear. His poems to her survive, written under the pen name Muhibi, the lover, and her letters to him reveal the desperate reality she faced. In one letter, she wrote, "Let my soul gain at least some comfort from a letter. Your sons and daughter weep for missing you." And beneath those emotional words lay a terrifying fact that she understood completely. Her sons were growing into men, and the law of the empire had not changed. 5 living sons still meant 5 possible deaths. If Suleiman fell on the battlefield, the eldest son, Mustafa, would seize the throne, and her 5 boys would be slaughtered in a single night. She knew it, and she was already preparing. About 13 years after Hürrem first entered Suleiman's life as property, he did something that shook the Islamic world to its core. Something no Ottoman Sultan had done in recorded history. He freed her from slavery. And then, he married her. The ceremony was formal, official, and completely legal. Foreign ambassadors in Constantinople could barely believe their own eyes. They rushed to send secret dispatches back to their governments in Europe. The Venetian representatives could find no precedent for this. A sultan, the most powerful ruler on earth, had legally married a woman who had arrived in his palace with a price tag on her neck. He gave her a brand new title, Asiki Sultan, the imperial consort. She was the first woman in Ottoman history to ever hold that rank. Her formal daily allowance was set to an astronomical 2,000 aspers a day. In a single stroke of a pen, the nameless slave girl became the wealthiest, most powerful woman in the entire empire. And she wasn't done yet. She moved her quarters out of the traditional harem building and into the private apartments of the new palace. These rooms shared a physical wall with the grand hall where the empire was actually governed. A century before, Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror had issued an absolute decree. No woman shall live in the same building where government business is conducted. That decree had stood like iron for 100 years. Suleiman took that decree and threw it away for her. The following year, his mother, Hafsa Sultan, died. The old queen was gone. The position of highest authority inside the imperial harem passed directly to Hürrem. There was no mother-in-law left to outrank her. No traditional rule she could not break. The girl from Ruthenia was now the legal mistress of the empire. She was no longer just a wife. She was a statesman. The girl who had arrived in Constantinople as property was now diplomatically active in the affairs of foreign kingdoms. Think of the audacity. She sat behind the stone walls of the palace, and she reached her hands across Europe. She corresponded directly with King Sigismund II of Poland, the ruler of the very territory she had been torn from as a child. She did not send threats, she sent terms of peace. She helped secure a lasting alliance between Poland and the Ottoman Empire. Europeans did not call her Hürrem. They did not know her as the cheerful one. They called her Roxolana, a name meaning the girl from Ruthenia. She was known in Venice. She was talked about in Paris. Her name was whispered in London. Foreign ambassadors quickly realized a terrifying truth. If you wanted to reach the ear of the Sultan, you had to pass through his wife first. But power inside a palace can fade if it is not anchored to the earth. Hürrem knew this. She needed to build a legacy that the public could see, something that made her untouchable to her enemies. So, she began to build. She commissioned a massive public complex in Constantinople. It was not a monument to her own vanity. It included a grand mosque, a school for children, a public bathhouse, a soup kitchen that fed thousands of the poor every single day, and a specialized hospital for women. Think about the placement of that hospital. It was built near the ancient slave markets of the city. Was that a deliberate choice? Did she choose that spot because she remembered the terror of being inspected by merchants? No written record survives to tell us her thoughts, but the action speaks louder than words. She did not use her wealth for decoration. Every project she funded served a desperate human function. She built a caravanserai in Jerusalem to protect pilgrims making the long journey to Mecca. She funded massive water infrastructure in Mecca itself. Every building she put up was designed to last, and they survived long after her bones turned to dust. And all the while, her sons were growing into men. The clock was ticking. Her eldest son, Mehmed, was the one Suleiman loved most. He had been sent to govern the province of Manisa, the traditional training ground for the heir apparent. Suleiman brought Mehmed onto military campaigns with him. He stood beside him in front of the troops. He favored him openly in ways that the entire court could see. Historians of the time described Mehmed as a young prince of incredibly sharp intellect and careful judgment. It was obvious to everyone. Suleiman intended Mehmed to be the next sultan. Hürrem's future seemed perfectly secure. Her favorite boy would take the throne, and her other sons would live. That tragedy struck. During a public celebration in Manisa, Mehmed fell violently ill. His skin erupted in burning sores, his fever spiraled out of control. On November the 7th, 1543, Prince Mehmed died. The disease was smallpox. He was only 21 years old. Suleiman was returning from a brutal campaign in Hungary when the news reached him. The master of the world was brought to his knees. He had the body brought back to Constantinople, and he sat by the corpse for 3 days in absolute, silent grief. He immediately ordered his chief architect, Sinan, to build a massive mosque in his son's memory, the Said Mosque. Suleiman wrote a heartbreaking poem for his dead child. He ended it with the words, "Most distinguished of the princes, my Sultan Mehmed." The man who commanded the largest empire on earth had lost his favorite son, and there was absolutely nothing his power could do to bring him back. And now, everything changed. The fragile peace was shattered. With Mehmed gone, the path to survival for Hürrem's family was completely wiped out. The competition for the throne shifted, and it shifted toward a name that Hürrem had been dreading for decades. Mustafa. Mustafa, Mahidevran's son. He was the boy Suleiman had fathered long before Hürrem ever set foot inside the palace. He had been sent away years ago, out of sight, to govern the distant province of Amazia. It was a clear signal from Suleiman that Mustafa was not the chosen favorite. But distance did not diminish what Mustafa had built. He was now in his 30s. He was tall, physically imposing, and highly experienced in the art of war and governance. The Janissaries, the elite military corps whose weapons decided who lived and died, respected him openly. The people across the empire spoke his name with absolute admiration. An Austrian ambassador wrote that Mustafa was marvelously well-educated and prudent. He added a chilling note, that he hoped such a strong leader would never come near the borders of his own country. The army loved him. The people loved him. And Hürrem understood exactly what that love meant. If Mustafa became sultan when Suleiman died, her 3 living sons would be dead within days. Not out of cruelty, out of procedure. Every sultan who had ever taken power had eliminated his brothers. The bowstring. No blood. It was the Ottoman way. Selim, Bayezid, Jahangir. 3 sons. 3 deaths. Waiting in the shadows. But Hürrem had one great advantage. Her son-in-law, the man she had arranged to marry her daughter Muraima, was now the Grand Vizier. His name was Rustam Pasha. He was the most senior official in the entire empire beneath the Sultan himself. He was the man who sat closest to Suleiman's ear. And Rustam began to speak. He told Suleiman carefully, repeatedly, that Mustafa was not simply popular. He told him that the prince had been in secret communication with the Janissaries. He dropped hints that Mustafa was not waiting for his father to die of old age, that he was making plans for a coup. Suleiman heard these words and said nothing at first, but the poison stayed with him. He was aging. He was paranoid. He remembered how his own father, Selim the Grim, had overthrown his grandfather. Fear is a powerful weapon. When Mustafa heard that he was being accused of plotting against his own father, he did exactly what an innocent man would do. He rode out to face him. Suleiman was on a military campaign in Persia. His army camped in a vast field. Mustafa rode to the camp to stand in front of his father directly, to deny the lies, to prove his loyalty in person. He rode because he believed the truth was a shield. He entered his father's tent. The tent was quiet, too quiet. The Sultan was there, sitting silently. But he was not alone. The executioners were already waiting in the shadows. The Sultan's mutes, men trained for exactly this kind of silent work. They moved the moment the signal was given. Mustafa fought. He was young and strong. He knew exactly what was happening. He tried to break free. He screamed for his father. But there were too many of them. They threw him to the hard ground. The heavy bowstring went around his neck, and it pulled tight. He was strangled to death inside his father's tent, while his father watched through the fabric of the walls. It happened on October the 6th, 1553. Mustafa was dead. What followed was a wave of grief that spread across the entire empire. The Janissaries wept openly in their tents. They demanded the head of Rustam Pasha. The people in the streets mourned the prince they thought would save them. Years later, a massive peasant rebellion broke out in Anatolia led by a man who claimed he was Mustafa, that he had survived. The grief was so deep that thousands believed the lie, and the rebellion had to be crushed by brutal force. The court blamed Hürrem immediately and completely. They said she wanted Mustafa removed, and so he was removed. But what they rarely said out loud was this: Suleiman was the one who gave the order. Suleiman was the one sitting in the tent. Whatever words had reached his ears from his wife or his vizier, the decision belonged to him alone. Hürrem was powerful, but she was not the sultan. The victory was hollow, and the price was blood. Weeks after Mustafa's execution, tragedy returned to strike Hürrem's household yet again. Jahangir, her youngest son, the fragile boy born with a broken spine, died. He had never been strong, his body had always been a prison of pain, but his mind had been sharp. The accounts from that time say he died of pure grief. He had loved his half-brother Mustafa deeply. His mind could not hold the horror of what had been done in that tent. Now, only two sons remained on the chessboard: Selim and Bayezid. Both were grown men, both were ambitious, and both were watching each other like hawks. The very war Hürrem had broken every law to prevent was now brewing between her own flesh and blood. But she would not live to see the end of it. In the final years of her life, Hürrem became seriously ill. The fire that had driven her for decades began to flicker out. And it was in these final days that the true nature of Suleiman's heart was revealed to the world. The Grand Sultan, the conqueror of nations, did not leave her side. The palace grew silent. Suleiman ordered all the musical instruments in the palace to be gathered and burned. He did not want a single stray note, a single loud sound, to disturb her rest. On the morning of April 15, 1558, Hürrem Sultan died in Constantinople. The French ambassador sent a secret letter to Paris that very afternoon. He wrote that the Sultan's grief was visible to everyone, that the sorrow had aged the ruler of the world overnight. He also recorded a striking rumor, that Suleiman had made a solemn promise to his dying wife that he would never take another woman into his bed. He never did. Her tomb was built in the rose garden of the great Suleimani Mosque, designed by the master architect Sinan. It was placed exactly where Suleiman would later be buried beside her. Even in death, they shared a wall. With Hürrem gone, the dam broke. The war between her surviving sons arrived with absolute fury. Bayezid raised an army, moving against his brother Selim and against his own father. It was madness. The imperial army was sent to hunt him down. Bayezid was defeated, fleeing east into Persia with his children. But there was no escape from the shadow of the Ottoman throne. After complex, cold negotiations, the Persian Shah turned them over to Suleiman's executioners in exchange for 400,000 pieces of gold. Bayezid, and all four of his young sons, were strangled to death in Persia in the year 1561. Only Selim remained. In September 1566, Suleiman the Magnificent died while on campaign in Hungary. He died inside his tent, just before a victory he would never see. His body was carefully preserved and returned to Constantinople, where he was laid to rest beside Hürrem, exactly as he had arranged. He had made her a promise, and he kept it to the very end. Selim became the new sultan, but he was not like his father. He did not lead great campaigns, he did not ride at the head of the army. Instead, he ruled from the comfort of Constantinople, relying entirely on his officials to manage the massive state. And it was during this vacuum of leadership that the true legacy of Hürrem Sultan shook the world. Over time, the real power shifted away from the battlefields, away from the grand viziers, and back into the palace, back toward the women within it. For the next 100 years, the mothers and chief consorts of the Ottoman sultans directed foreign policy, managed imperial successions, and shaped the destiny of the world in ways no woman had ever been allowed to before. Historians call this era the Sultanate of Women. It was a century of rule that began in 1534, the moment Hürrem first took control of the harem. And almost every single woman who wielded that staggering power arrived in Constantinople the exact same way Hürrem had, without a name, without status, as property. She had not set out to rewrite history. She had not set out to build an empire of women. She had simply acted within a brutal, unforgiving system to secure her own survival, and to protect the lives of her sons. But the space she forced open with her bare hands did not close when her heart stopped beating. It remained. She entered the gates of Constantinople as a slave, stripped of everything. She left behind a structure that ran the most powerful empire on earth long after she was gone. If you enjoy dark untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.